Keir Starmer, the Chancellor, plans to abolish the lifetime tax-free pensions allowance. Isn't it right to encourage people to work for longer and save for their retirement?
It is right to encourage people to work for longer, but to have a £1 billion giveaway to the richest 1% for pensions that most people couldn't even dream of is completely wrong, the wrong priorities. We do need a scheme for doctors. That could easily have been done. But I think for families that are struggling in Scotland with the cost of living crisis, bills going up, energy bills going up, notwithstanding the cap, mortgages through the roof because of the mess the government has made of the economy. The idea that the government says the only tax cut in this budget is for the wealthiest 1% for pensions that you couldn't dream of shows you just how out of touch this government is and how they've got their priorities completely wrong.
To be clear, how are you planning to oppose this?
Well, we will have a vote on this on Tuesday of next week in Parliament. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, you don't say to the wealthiest 1% you can have an even bigger pension than you had before, while saying to families across Scotland, we've got nothing for you. That is the wrong priority. I want to get doctors or keep doctors in work. That could easily have been done with a bespoke, tailored agreement. It's been done for other groups in the past. £1 billion giveaway is indefensible. The government knows it. We're going to force it to a vote. And if Conservative MPs want to vote for the wrong priority and send a message to Scottish families that the wealthiest 1% is more important to them than the cost of living crisis to Scottish families, then let them do that.
This is your second trip to Scotland in a week. Before Nicola Sturgeon announced her resignation, we were lucky to see you once a year. Is this you sensing opportunity in Scotland?
Well, let me just correct you on that, because I think if you look, I've been coming very regularly to Scotland. Here we are at the Edinburgh
Twice
University.
in a week is unusual.
Edinburgh University. I was here just not so long ago talking to them in the lab across the way there. So I do come to Scotland regularly, but yes, I'm coming because it's very important to make the case that if you want change in Scotland, and of course many people want change, I completely understand that, then the change is not just the narrow question of who should be the next leader of the SNP. It's the much bigger question of a Labour government. And of course...
You only have one MP in Scotland at the moment. Can you put a number on how many seats you'd like to win here in the next general election?
Well, look, I do want to win more seats here in Scotland at the next general election.
Many?
Well, look, I'm not going to go into numbers, but I think I'd say two things. Firstly, it's very important to an incoming Labour government that we represent Scotland, and Scotland's an integral part of our plan for the future. I want a changed and better Scotland within a changed and better United Kingdom. But it's very important that we make the case for change, because what we're seeing from the SNP is an implosion, candidates now arguing amongst themselves about just how bad their record in government has been. And that's why I think it's clear to many people the SNP has now run out of road, they've run out of ideas, they're talking to themselves instead of talking to the country. And it falls to the Labour Party to say, look, there is a case for change, we want to make that positive change for case, there's huge potential here in Scotland.
Is that the case in areas like the south of Scotland, for example? If you look at the seat of Dumfries and Galloway, for example, once a Labour seat in the last election, you finished third, 17,000 votes behind the Conservatives. Is that the kind of seat you could win back?
Look, I have great ambition across the whole of Scotland. And if you look at the progress we've made in the last 2 years, we've made huge progress as Scottish Labour. Now the second party here in Scotland, taking the arguments out there, challenging the Scottish Government, the SNP, and whilst they're turning in on themselves and arguing about their record in government, we're making the positive case. I'm here saying innovation in Scotland is brilliant, some of the cell treatment we've seen this morning, but it's being held back by the government here and the government in Westminster. I want that to change. I want the biggest, highest sustained growth in the G7 for our economy here in Scotland. I want Clean Power 2030 here in Scotland. So the argument I'm making is not just that the SNP have run out of road, they clearly have, but also the positive case of what a Labour government in Westminster could do in and with Scotland.
Looking ahead to that election again, all three SNP leadership candidates have said if you need their support, to govern at Westminster, their price would be another independence referendum. Will you give it to them?
I'm afraid they're operating in a parallel universe. We're not doing a deal with the SNP, and that, no ifs, no buts, there is no basis for a deal between a progressive Labour government and an SNP that thinks that the only answer to all the challenges we face is to break up the United Kingdom. So there will not be a deal. So they're having a debate amongst themselves, which is in a parallel universe to the reality.
On the subject of a second referendum,
the same one that Anas Sawar put to them yesterday, which is, you know, if they want to vote down an incoming Labour government and usher back in another 5 years of Conservative government, well, let them make that case, because we're not doing a deal with them.
Is there any circumstance in which you would allow a second independence referendum?
Look, of course this has to be a matter for Scotland, but if I look at the priorities, if I look at, you know, the cost of living crisis here in Scotland, the energy bills through the roof, mortgage payments through the roof, a real concern about when the next generation of jobs come, economic growth, public services, education, the drugs problem here in Scotland. There are so many things that need change that the idea that none of that really gets dealt with, the priority is independence, I just think is completely wrong-ended.
A blanket no to another independence referendum. You're a Brexit believer. There's nothing to distinguish you here from the Conservatives, is there?
Well, look, that is a completely...
On those 2 points, on independence and Brexit, there's nothing to distinguish you.
That's a daft thing to say.
In what way? You say a blanket no to another independence referendum. You want to make Brexit work. Exactly the same as what the Conservatives say.
Well, the Conservatives have got a deal that doesn't work for Scotland. We will change that with a better deal for Scotland.
To rejoin the single market
we want a closer trading relationship. The Conservatives got no plan for growth. They said that was a growth budget yesterday with a forecast for downward growth. We've got a mission with a plan behind it for the highest sustained growth in the G7. Couldn't have a bigger gap between us and the Conservatives on that. When it comes to the NHS, they've got sticking plasters that they apply every year to a broken NHS. We've got a plan for the next 75 years of the NHS, including prevention, innovation, sort of thing we're seeing in the labs here today. When it comes to the green technology of the future, they're going backwards. We're going forward, saying clean power by 2030, which have a massive impact here in Scotland. So the question you put to me, you know, with all respect, just has no foundation.
Very briefly, finally, you will have to work closely with whoever wins the SNP leadership contest. Who do you, out of those 3 candidates, think you would work best with?
Look, I don't fear any of the candidates. It's up to the SNP to elect their candidate. They need to do that, by the way, with an open, transparent, accountable mechanism. This is a very important election. But if we have the privilege of forming the next Labour government, and if I have the privilege of being the Labour Prime Minister for the whole of the United Kingdom, I will work constructively with whoever is First Minister here in Scotland. That will be a material change from what you've seen in the last 13 years. So Scotland will have a loud and powerful and influential voice in a Labour United Kingdom.
Keir Starmer, thank you very much.
Thank you.